Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys. Welcome back. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today's class, we're going to start with a loving kindness meditation like we do each class. I'm going to start with the chanting, and then we're just going to do the breathing mindfulness meditation without me guiding you, just you doing the breathing mindfulness meditation. And then I'm going to come in with the guidance for loving kindness meditation. And then we'll come out of that with some more breathing mindfulness meditation and chanting. And then afterwards, that's where I'm going to start our topics of discussion. Today, I'm going to start with sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. If you have children, great. You can use this for them. But if not, you'll also learn some things in here that'll help you with your brothers and sisters, your mom and your dad, and other people around you like this. There's ways that you can actually help people along the path. So I'll share that with you. And then after our lunch break, I'm going to share with you how to choose a wholesome friends and how to choose a life partner, because the choices that we make about who we associate with and our life partner is going to be very impactful to us. And it's important to make these decisions without judging other people, without looking down on them. So I'm going to teach you how to do that after our lunch break. So if you'd like to join for the meditation, or if you'd like to join for the chanting, you're more than welcome. And then, like I mentioned, I'll come in with guidance after the breathing mindfulness meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Makavata Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Pisu Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May mom and dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all those who I come into contact with today be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have caused harm to be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be well. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโหตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone online as well. This is the fourth day of our 5-day course where I'm teaching students how to develop harmony in their relationships. And today's topic is sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path, which we're going to get to in a moment. And then this afternoon, I'm going to be teaching about how to make wise choices about wholesome friends and a life partner. But before we do that, I would like to just let you know that at the beginning of the course, I mentioned to you that the meditation we did on the first day was quite brief and quite short. I think it was maybe 10 or 12 minutes. And I mentioned to you that I was going to gradually expand that over time, helping you build up your practice to the point where you'd be meditating 30 minutes or more. So I'd like to let you know that the meditation we just did is the first one we did. That was 30 minutes. So I've been gradually building you guys up to these longer and longer meditations. So if this meditation felt like, wow, I could have done some more, like that was pretty short, okay, you can see that you can meditate for 30 minutes and you can even do more if you like. But if you're meditating and you're like, wow, this was quite long, this was kind of challenging for me. Now you can see where you have growth and you can actually grow into this meditation where you can grow into a 30-minute meditation. So just to let you know, that was a 30-minute meditation. And then what I'd like to do before we start our topic is just open up to any questions you guys have about meditation, because we've been meditating each morning and afternoon, and you might actually have some questions about your meditation practice. And if you do, I'd like to kind of take some time to discuss those and give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions as you're building up your meditation practice. Remember, here at the temple, you guys can use the microphones. That'll allow the people online to be able to hear what you're saying. And then for those of you guys online, if you'd like to ask any questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So I see you guys have some mics, so yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, first of all, to let us ask questions. One of my questions during the loving kindness meditation was, I find it hard to, when we get to the people who harm me or cause harm in me, and wish them all peace, safe, and well. I feel like a strong bodily sensation when I think of that, and my body is just even resisting that thought of giving that kind of meditation. So wondering, how should we deal with that?
Okay, so this is perfect that you're noticing those bodily sensations, because that's that first foundation of mindfulness that I taught on Monday. You were here when I was teaching that. That's the preliminary or early warning system that the body and the mind has that alerts you that discontentedness is about to arise. And that's where you would like to cut that off and let it go, whether you're in meditation or you're in daily life, because your mind's about to form a conditioned feeling. You're about to get annoyed or frustrated or angry or sad or some other discontent feeling. And that bodily sensation is the early warning system alerting you to this. And the fact that you're aware of it so early like this, having just started learning, this is wonderful. And what you would like to do, whether you're in meditation or outside of meditation, is cut it off and let it go. That's going to essentially rewire the mind to no longer form conditioned feelings. So the mind's craving is getting triggered. And when it's getting triggered, it's arising this potential discontentedness. And if you cut it off as a bodily sensation, you're saying, nope, not going to let you have that conditioned feeling, Mrs. Mind, right? I'm not going to let you do that. And now more and more, when you do that, your mind won't form conditioned feelings, that it'll just be peaceful and joyful. You'll always remember these things that people have done in the past, but it won't have any feelings about it. You won't have any feelings about like, oh, that was horrible, or I'm angry or frustrated, or why'd they do that to me, or that's not, whatever, you're not going to have all of that going on in your mind, but you'll always remember like the things that happened to me in my childhood. While I was discontent from my own cravings, desires, attachments, and my expectations of my family, I remember the things that happened, but I just don't have feelings about it anymore because it's in the past. It was impermanent. It was something when I was a child. There were things when I was a child. I didn't have the ability to change any of that stuff because I didn't have the wisdom. But now I'm an adult and I don't need to form my feelings based on those things that happened in the past. So I'll go into this other part of it. Is sometimes people think that when you have a traumatic experience happen to you, that you're going to be affected for the rest of your life. And this just isn't true. What's happening is the mind is clinging and holding on to this experience from the past, and now it's forming feelings in the present moment based on something that's happened in the past. And what the Buddha's teachings are teaching you and guiding you to do is let that go and no longer form your feelings today based on things that happened in the past. And you can get to a point where you just leave these things in the past. So whether you're in meditation or outside of meditation, just cut that off and let it go. And that's why you're doing that breathing mindfulness meditation at the beginning. So as you're getting into your loving kindness meditation, if you're saying, may all those who have caused me harm be peaceful, and right away you're noticing the bodily sensations, you might pause those affirmations, cut off, do like 2 or 3 minutes of breathing mindfulness meditation, and then come back. May all those who cause me harm be safe. Right? And now you notice some bodily sensations. Okay, you might have to cut off, and then go to the next one. So this is how you're going to transform the mind in meditation and outside of meditation, not to have those conditioned feelings.
I have another question around, so I find it easier at the start of loving kindness meditation where I say, okay, me and my family be well. It's very easy to conceptualize. But once I get to all beings in the world, it's very hard to even think about that or conceptualize. So what are some good solutions?
That's the practice, right? Including this challenge that you're having with may all those who cause me harm be peaceful, right? This is the practice that the mind just doesn't want to do that. It's hindered from doing that. It's got that ill will in there, that frustration, that agitation, that annoyance. And this is the reason why you would like to just keep practicing it and getting to that point. And sometimes what you can do is like, say you're walking about in the world and you see like a big crowd of people just get off a bus or something here in Chiang Mai, and you can just sit there and look at them and may they all be well. May they all be peaceful. May they all be safe. May they all have a wonderful time here in Chiang Mai. You don't have to say anything to them. You can just kind of visualize all these people. And one of the things that you can do to cultivate loving kindness in the mind that the Buddha teaches, in addition to this meditation, is he teaches you that every being that you come into contact with, whether human or animal or otherwise, he says it would be nearly impossible for you to interact with somebody that hasn't previously been your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter, or some other relative, because we've all been reborn so many countless times that essentially we're all family, right? So like when we were lizards, you and I were brothers, or maybe you were my grandfather and I was your granddaughter, right? When we were lizards or monkeys or something like this, or previous human beings. So we're all family. And here in Thailand, when we go out and about, we actually speak to each other as if we're family. So if I go into a restaurant and I've never been to that restaurant before, and there's a lady or a man there, I might refer to them as grandma or grandfather, or little brother or little sister, or even mom and dad, refer to them that way. And we do that in the Thai language. So this is really helpful to train the mind to look at everybody as family members. Because yes, it is really easy to arise that loving kindness for your family members. And that's why I have that at the beginning part of the meditation, to kind of bubble the loving kindness up. And then it kind of spills over into these other categories. So one of the things that the Buddha teaches you is to change your perspective. Instead of looking at people as strangers, because sometimes we're taught, don't talk to strangers. Right? Strangers are bad. They're going to hurt you. They're going to bother you. You're going to have a problem. Well, if we never talk to strangers, which are really just people we haven't met yet, if we never talk to strangers, we would never meet anybody new. The only people we would ever know is our parents, because those are the only people that we're born into the world typically with, is our parents. So if we never talk to people that we don't know, then we would never meet anybody. So rather than go around the world with the perception of, wow, these are strangers, they're out to get me, they want something from me, they're bad, instead you go out into the world with the perspective of, wow, these are family members that I just haven't met yet. Wow, hello, I haven't met you yet, right? If a brand new person is like, wow, good morning, wow, I haven't met this family member yet, right? So you can be smiling and you can be cheerful and you can cultivate this loving kindness, not just in meditation, but in your day-to-day life too, when you go out and about. Now in Thailand, because we speak in Thai, and I might say to someone, call them mom or dad or, grandma or grandpa, even though I've never met them before, when I go into other countries where, maybe like when I was in Egypt or Mexico or the USA, I don't refer to people that way, because in their culture, they would kind of look at me kind of strange if I started doing that. And not that it would bother me, but I just interested in having healthy relationships with them. But my mind thinks that way. So like when the taxi driver picked me up at the airport, I'm thinking like, wow, this is my uncle. It's an older man. Like, wow, this is my uncle. And I'm going to treat this person like a family member. So this is one of the ways to rise up the loving kindness in your mind, but then practice it in day-to-day life, because that's where the real transformation is happening. The meditation is helpful. It's like filling up your gas tank, but you need to be able to go out into the world and practice being loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. And this is where thinking of people as your family members can be really helpful. All right.
This might be a very subtle question around breathing mindfulness meditation, but while the mind is being focused on the sensations of the breath through the nose, when other things enter the mind's awareness, like certain sounds, maybe a breeze against the skin, how should we situate those things within our awareness?
Yeah, just understand that they're impermanent and just keep bringing your mind back to your breath. Just cut that off. So if there's any thoughts, like say you're in meditation and you hear a car go by, you just like to understand that's impermanent, cut it off, bring the mind back to the breath. Don't allow the mind to crave silence, for example. Yeah. So now when the car goes by, the mind would get annoyed in that situation. Instead, you just stay in meditation, focused on the breath. You know that there's a car that's gone by, but you don't let it disturb your peacefulness and your joy. This is the way that you train your mind to be completely comfortable with impermanence. That no matter what's happening in your meditation, you allow the mind to reside in peacefulness and joy, in contentedness and calm.
And what results? Is it an expanded awareness, a narrowed awareness, or both?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
In terms of the awareness that results from focusing just on the breath there, does it result in an expanded awareness, a narrowed awareness, or both?
Yeah, what you're doing is you're developing your mindfulness. You're developing your awareness of mind. So if you're focused on the breath and you don't hear the car, fine, that's wonderful. You just stay focused. That's developing your concentration. But if you do have awareness of that sound or something like that, that's just, and your mind moves off the breath, that's developing your mindfulness, that you're aware that the mind did move off the breath. And now being aware of that movement, now you cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. Because those are the three things that are happening in breathing mindfulness meditation. Is you're developing your mindfulness or awareness of mind, you're developing your concentration or your focus, your singleness of mind, and you're developing the ability to let go. Let go, let go. So if you're in meditation and your mind doesn't move when that car goes by and you have no idea that it was even there, wonderful. But if the mind does move off because it hears that car, then just bring it back. And that's helping you to develop your awareness of mind or your mindfulness more readily, and the ability to let go, which is what you need in day-to-day life. You need that ability to notice that anger coming up, or notice that frustration, or notice that annoyment. That's your mindfulness in day-to-day life. And then in day-to-day life, when you're noticing that with your mindfulness, you cut that off and let it go. So doing these meditations, it's like taking your mind to the gym. You're exercising the mind and building these qualities so that then in day-to-day life, you can actually apply them in day-to-day life. It's kind of like if you did go to the gym and you lifted weights and your friend was like, hey, can you help me move that sofa? You're like, sure, no problem. You know, you can do it really easily. So the same thing is true with meditation. If you're building these qualities in meditation in day-to-day life, when the anger comes up, you know exactly what to do. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to consider it. You don't have to sit there and look at the thoughts and evaluate the thoughts and invite the thoughts into the mind. You just already know when those bodily sensations come, the very next thing is going to be a feeling in the mind, a conditioned feeling, and you're not interested in that. And the very next thing after a conditioned feeling is it's going to affect the condition of your mind more long term. Then it's going to form this mental object and feed this mental object. So as soon as you notice the bodily sensations, you know to cut it off and let it go. It becomes automatic based on your wisdom of the mind and these natural laws. But then if you miss it as that bodily sensation, that's where you cut it off as a feeling. If you miss it there, the condition of the mind, but more and more you would like to back it up to cutting it off as a bodily sensation. And that awareness of mind is what's going to help you to do that. But those other terms you were using, narrowed awareness or expanded awareness, the Buddha didn't use those kinds of words. Claire, you have a question?
Kind of getting back to this earlier question, what is the actual process that's expected during this loving kindness meditation? Am I just focusing on the words? May all those who have caused me harm be safe? Or do I want to be thinking about actually the people who have caused me harm?
You can do in either of those things. And then there's something else you can do too. Some people visualize it. They visualize it in their mind, like that person or that group of people is sitting in front of them. So like when I was doing this with my mom and I had all that resentment, I would envision her sitting on the floor in front of me, because I used to meditate on the floor a lot, that she was sitting cross-legged in front of me. And I envisioned like this molasses, this thick syrup coming over her head and enveloping her with loving kindness, because this is what the Buddha teaches. He doesn't teach the visualization thing, but what he teaches is he teaches you to envelop the whole world with loving kindness, right? So you can do this visually in the mind, that you say the words, and then you notice there's that gap in there that I do. That gap in there is for you to be able to visualize, like really drawing up through right effort, drawing up into the mind, may mom be peaceful, right? And really drawing it up and really cultivating that in the mind. And then you breathe out, you're breathing in, and then Now may mom be safe, and like really drawing that up. So I give the mind a lot of time to be able to do that in between each statement. That's why it's not real fast with the statements. They're really spaced out. And then also in between each ring, I don't know if you guys noticed that I'm putting a breath cycle in there too. So it's may mom be peaceful, right, on the out breath. And then may breathe it in, may mom be safe. And then breathing in, may mom be well. And then breathing in, may mom be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. But now I'm going to breathe in, I'm going to breathe out, I'm going to breathe in again, and then that's where I start the next ring. So it gives you a lot of time in there to really cultivate the mind for that individual. So you could focus on the words, you could think about the person or the group of people, or you could do this visualization that I'm talking about. Whatever works for you to draw up the loving kindness into the mind and really get it permeating in the mind. That's what the Buddha teaches you, is to fill the mind with loving kindness. Basically, he talks about permeating loving kindness in the mind and encompassing and enveloping the entire world with this loving kindness. He has this one discourse that we studied recently in the Pali Canon and English study group, that he talks about if some criminals were to essentially kidnap you and lay you on a table, and they had a two-handed saw, and they were sawing you from limb to limb to limb, like they were sawing you off at the ankle, they were sawing you off at the knee, they were sawing you off at the hip. He said that if in that moment you had hatred towards those criminals, he said you wouldn't be practicing his teachings, right? That's how like the loving kindness really is. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have so much loving kindness in your mind. This wouldn't happen to you as an enlightened being. An enlightened being wouldn't be, kidnapped by criminals and sawed in half and stuff like this. But if it did happen as an enlightened being, it would be impossible for you to be angry at these people, sawing you from limb to limb. The mind just won't do it. It's just physically impossible to have hatred towards those individuals, because your mind would understand this is their craving, this is their anger, this is their ignorance. You understand that this body is impermanent, it doesn't belong to you. If they start sawing you apart, it's like, all right, well, it's time to die. Let's go. You're not holding on to the world and wanting to be here, but you're also not craving to be dead either, right? You're in the middle. You're not craving life, but you're not craving extermination either. You just understand, like, okay, this is the circumstance. It's time to die. Let's die. So in that situation, he says, and oftentimes the Buddha talks in extremes like this so that it really helps to imprint the understanding of his teachings. Because when you're teaching in an oral tradition, if you make these stories like really memorable, people will remember them, right? So that's why he talks in that extreme. Like I said, I don't suspect that an enlightened being will ever have that situation occur, but you can understand like how much loving kindness you would like to cultivate in your mind. And what he says as part of this discourse is, he says, if you can have loving kindness in this situation when someone's sawing you from limb to limb to limb, he's saying, if somebody talks harsh to you, can you at least, kind of endure and be patient with that speech? So he's like, and the students are like, yeah, of course, we can be patient with that speech, if somebody's harsh and bitter and hostile with us. So you would like to get to the point where your mind's unaffected by what's going on in the outside world. Mm-hmm. Any other questions you guys have on this topic? Meditation. Yep. Diego.
I would like to know, it's kind of like normal to have some kind of like tricking, and the mind makes some kind of trick during the meditation. For example, sometimes during the meditation, I can feel that I have some different bodily sensation as like some members of my body, like my hands or my feet, it's become bigger, or some disassociation with my mind and body. It's like when I can feel that I'm like going outside my body or something like this.
Yeah, these are very common, that as you're training your mind more and more, you're going to have these different experiences. And we don't really teach it in the classes, but when students are talking about it, that's how we know where you are in your practice, that these are common things that you'll experience, that as you're training your mind, you're going to see how creative it is and really how powerful it is, that you can actually see this separation, that there's some times where you might be meditating and you can actually see and kind of like look down on yourself. You're like almost like in the corner looking down on yourself. You can experience the expanding of body parts. Sometimes people talk about their head feels like the size of an elephant when they're meditating. This is all very common, and these are the physiological changes that are happening in the body. And then also it helps you to be able to see the separation of the body and the mind, that the body is one thing and the mind is completely different, because the idea of like sitting in meditation, and then when you're there and you can literally get to the point where some people are like in the corner, like looking down at themselves. You can physically see yourself meditating. And this helps you to be able to independently verify these things, that the body is one thing, the mind is completely separate. It helps you to be able to see the physiological changes in the body and all these different things. It also helps you to learn to not be attached to this body, that this body isn't you, it's not who you are. And that when all these changes are happening and you're noticing the expanding of your head, you're not like, oh my goodness, what is that? And you're so scared. Instead, you just realize like, this is impermanent. Like, of course, my head, it feels like it's the size of an elephant, but I'm just going to sit here and focus on the breath. I'm not doing any harm to anybody, so therefore no harm is going to come to me. You can independently verify the natural law of Game in these kinds of situations. So each one of these situations gives you the opportunity to have direct experience that is going to be able to independently verify some aspect of the teaching. And sometimes it's multiple aspects of the teachings. So you can use those kinds of situations to verify these kinds of things. Okay. All right. So I think that's all of our questions. Let me just check online though, just to be sure. Welcome to everyone online. Good morning to all of you guys, or good evening, good afternoon, wherever time zone you guys might be in. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online anywhere. Okay, so we're going to move into this topic of sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. When the Buddha talks about a parent's role with their relationship with their child, he essentially talks about our role as a parent is to guide our children, because this is based on understanding that we are impermanent in our children's lives, and our children come into the world and they have a lack of wisdom. They don't have the same wisdom as us, and our role as a parent is to guide our child in developing that wisdom. Sometimes we think that our role as a parent is to control our child or force them to do the things that we want them to do, but this would actually be unwise and is going to promote a relationship where there's hostility and bitterness in your relationship. Very problematic to have a relationship where a parent is trying to control a child, putting their expectations on the child. If you have parents that have done that to you, you know how you don't like that, right? And it's fostered a relationship that has been less than perfect, right? So if you're in a relationship and you have a child, you would like to understand that you are impermanent in their life and they are their own independent being. And your role in their life is to guide them in cultivating wisdom, because you can't be in their life permanently, and they're going to be making either wise decisions that lead to wholesome results or wholesome karma, and they're going to be making unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. And you're not going to be there all the time. Early in their life, you're around them quite a bit, but as they age, you're going to be spending less and less time with them. And if you've done your role as a parent, you've helped them to build wisdom, and you've guided them to the point where even when they're not with you, they're able to make wise decisions. If your children can only make wise decisions when you're around, then they haven't been able to cultivate the wisdom to become an independent being that is able to understand wise and unwise decision making. So the way that is important to be able to see this is that your child is their own individual being, and you as a parent is kind of like alongside of them, just guiding them and providing them information and wisdom that's going to help them cultivate wisdom, so that whether you're there or not, they can have the confidence to make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. And where they make unwise decisions, because they're going to do that, it's important to not get angry and not get frustrated and agitated with them, but instead just realize this being has a lack of wisdom, and your role as a parent is to sit down with them and talk with them and help guide them to better decision making through cultivation of wisdom. Sometimes as parents, we think our role is to punish our child for the things that they're doing unwisely, but punishment just creates fear in their mind and creates this turbulent relationship between you and the child. Instead, you just need to realize that whatever they're doing, whether they're lying, whether they're stealing, whether they're doing some other kind of thing like this, because this is what children do sometimes when they're young, they're doing it because they have a lack of wisdom. They're not doing it because they're a bad person. It's just that they have a lack of wisdom. They have that craving, they have that anger, and they have that ignorance, just like every other unenlightened being. And the thing that's going to transform all of this is the cultivation of wisdom. So a punishment doesn't give them any kind of wisdom. You would like to sit down and talk with them and guide them and help them to understand. Part of your role as a parent is to understand your child's mind. And when you understand their mind and how they make decisions and why they make those decisions, you can see where they're lacking wisdom and then just help them to cultivate that wisdom. So oftentimes when my son has made unwise decisions, it's a matter of sitting down and asking him questions. Why did you make that decision? What were you thinking at the time? Did you have any feelings that were in your mind that motivated those decisions? Are those decisions that you think are wise or unwise? If you were in that same situation, would you make those same kinds of decisions? Right? So oftentimes the guidance that he's getting from me is actually questions, and I'm leading him to a certain point through my questions, and he's actually teaching himself through these decisions. So as a parent, your role is to guide your child. And this is something that I'm going to teach you guys as part of this particular talk. But also, the Buddha teaches that if you have family members or people that are close to you in your life, not just children, but let's just say your parents or your brothers or siblings or life partners or other people like this, even coworkers. He says if there's people in your life that you think will heed your advice and they will listen to you and they will be interested in understanding, he says it would be wise to make an effort to help establish them in the Four Noble Truths. Because the Four Noble Truths is where you have that breakthrough to understanding what the problem is in the mind, what the cause of that problem is, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is where you can understand that your anger is being caused by your own mind. Your sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings are being caused by your own mind. So he talks about if you have people in your life that you think will heed your advice, not just children, but other people too, he says it would be wise to make an effort to be able to help establish them in understanding the Four Noble Truths. So this talk that I'm going to share with you, while it's centered around children, it can really be applied to other people in your life too. It can be applied to your parents, your siblings, and other people like this, because you might have those kinds of individuals that you need to maybe share some information with. Because while this path to enlightenment is all about your learning, your growth, your development, you evolving into a better and better human being, you training your mind, you getting rid of the pollution of your mind, that's what the whole path is about. And that's what I would encourage you to focus on. But also, it's really nice to spend time with people who are actually practicing the teachings. So if you are a parent and you have children, it's really wonderful when you and your children are practicing the teachings, because you're going to have a much more harmonious home. Or let's just say you have a life partner. It's really wonderful if you and that person is practicing the teachings, because you're going to have a much more harmonious relationship. So in situations where you see somebody's really struggling, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, life partners, or whoever, it's wise to try to help them to learn some of these teachings. And there's skillful ways to do that. As we were talking yesterday, it's important that you don't have any craving or desire for other people to learn the teachings. Because if you have an expectation, if you have a craving, you're going to be pushing and pushing and pushing, and you're going to be forcing them to learn the teachings. But if you are learning the things that I'm going to share with you here, these are ways that you can kind of skillfully help somebody to learn the teachings. But if you've tried that once or twice or maybe even 3 times and they're just not interested, you need to learn how to back away. right? So like all of my family members, my grandmother has been very interested in what it is that I'm doing and understanding what I'm doing. And she's read my book, the first book, and she asked me questions all through her life and stuff like this. But other people in my family, yeah, they've never really asked me anything at all. They know that David does that Buddhism thing, but that's it. Right. And I see that they have judgment towards other people. I see they're struggling. They have sorrow. They have grief. They have despair. I see that they have quarrels amongst themselves. And I know that all the answers of how they can fix that, but they're just not interested. Right. And there's occasions where I've done things skillfully to try to help them, but they just don't, it doesn't take root. So you've got to just be able to let go and realize that, okay, they're just going to suffer. And that's the choices that they're making. But the things that I'm going to share with you here are ways that you can skillfully help people in your life. So even though it says sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path, this first part of sharing the path to enlightenment is what you might decide to do. But you need to be able to do that skillfully. And you need to be sure you're not just pushing your way in and you're not trying to force people and control people and crave and desire and try to convince people to do something. That's not what this path is about. This path is always about your own development and your own learning and your own growth. But the more wise that you become, you might be able to skillfully help people around you where possible. But in some situations, you're just not going to be able to, and those people are just going to have to suffer. And that's their choice. Right? You're becoming more and more peaceful. You're becoming more and more joyful. You see it's happening with your mind, and the people around you aren't. And you've tried to help them 1, 2, maybe 3 times. You just got to let go and just be like, okay, that's their choice. They're not interested. Right? So this is what I'm going to share with you guys. So, the first thing to share is just kind of this idea of understanding what you are as an individual parent or anybody else that you're trying to help to grow and help to develop. That the way I think about this, as the children are like growing a plant. You're the plant enthusiast, right? The child is the plant. You're the plant enthusiast, the one who's interested in growing this plant. In the teachings of the Buddha, those are like the guide stake, that they're guiding this plant. Right? So your goal as the plant enthusiast is to help this plant along this guide stake. So the teachings of the Buddha are the guide stake, and your child is the one who's doing the growth. When my wife got pregnant with our son, right away I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to buy all these parenting books, and I'm going to have to read them all, and I'm going to have to sort through them and figure out what to do. And then ultimately I came to realize, like, no, I don't have to do that. All I need to do is teach him the Eightfold Path. And if I teach him the Eightfold Path, that's everything he needs to know. And he'll have just a wonderful life, and we'll have a wonderful relationship. So that's what I've done, is I've just used the teachings of the Buddha as this guide stake. So I've been the plant enthusiast, and he's the plant, and I'm actively working to help him grow and develop, realizing he's making all his own decisions, and he gets to make his own decisions, and I'm impermanent in his life, and my role is to help him cultivate wisdom. But he's the one that needs to cultivate the wisdom. I'm the one who's just providing the opportunity to do that and give him the guidance that he needs without putting expectations on him or trying to control him or anything like that. Okay, so this is how this talk is kind of centered around you being the plant enthusiast. The teachings of the Buddha are the guide stake, and the child or whoever else is this plant that's growing. Okay, so now one of the first things you need to be able to do is you need to acquire wisdom. You're not going to be able to help anybody at all if you don't have the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. I got this a little bit backwards when I was living in America originally, that I opened up a business of Thai massage, and I was teaching Thai massage, and I was teaching a little bit of Buddhism, and I was helping lots of people. I probably had about 2,000 students who were actively learning Thai massage with me, and they were paying for the Thai massage courses. But because I knew Thai massage was part of this cultural fabric of Thailand, I was not just teaching the technique of Thai massage, I was teaching Thai culture and Buddhism as well. So people were signing up for a Thai massage class, but they were getting this culture and this Buddhism too, and it was really helpful for them. And I was helping, I had about 2,000 students, and then I had maybe about 20, 25 employees, and in a given time frame, we might have seen maybe 100,000, 200,000 customers over the time of our business. maybe how many people that we serviced, right? So I helped a certain amount of people during that period of time. But what was really lacking was my own development. When I was in America, I was giving to so many people that I wasn't doing the work to train my own mind. So I could only help a certain amount of people. When I came here to Thailand in 2015, I closed all my businesses and I started working on my own mind. And by the time I started doing that, by the 2018 timeframe, when I was like, whoa, I understand these teachings now. I can really start helping people. Within a matter of months, I was able to help tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. Now we're maybe even into the millions because of live streaming and all the people that can interact with these teachings online and so forth. I hear stories all the time. Like Claire just told me a story yesterday. She was down in Bangkok talking to somebody who used to be ordained and who was really into Buddhism, and she was like, oh, there's this teacher back in Chiang Mai that you should maybe consider learning from, or at least joining their YouTube channel. And she said, he's like, who? And she's like, David Roylands. He's like, oh yeah, I already know him. I'm already following his stuff. So like more and more people are learning about what I'm doing, and they're learning from what I'm doing. But the only reason why here in the last, I guess, 6 years, I've been able to reach millions of people is because I cultivated wisdom. Earlier, I hadn't cultivated the full wisdom. So in a 12-year period, I was only maybe able to help about 100,000 or 200,000 people. And I was helping people through others, right? And really the students, there were only 2,000 students. Well, I probably see 2,000 students now within a 2-month time frame, maybe 3-month time frame. I'm helping 2,000 students, right? Where before it took me 12 years to be able to help 2,000 students. So when you focus on acquiring your own wisdom and developing your own wisdom, and you keep that as the priority, you'll not only help yourself, but by you cultivating that wisdom, you'll have the wisdom to go out into the world and help so many other people, right? So that's what you would like to stay focused on, is really developing your own wisdom and acquiring your wisdom. No matter how much you're helping other people, you need to always maintain your own practice. So like me, I come here and I teach, maybe 14, 15, maybe 20 days, 25 days a month. I'm coming here to teach. And then even when I'm at home, I'm online helping students, but I'm always maintaining my own practice. I'm always finding time for my own meditations. That's a priority, is I'm meditating 2 or 3 times a day. I'm still doing that, right? And I'm still interested in the Buddhist teachings and reading discourses and understanding how can I tweak the way I'm saying something. So I've always keep my own practice as the number one priority. And I help all of you guys, but the only reason why I'm able to do that is because I've acquired a certain amount of wisdom. So you need to be able to keep that as your main focus, is acquiring wisdom, because you're not going to be able to help children. You're not going to help your parents or your siblings or anybody else if you don't have wisdom. So if you just started learning these teachings, you don't need to go out there and try to help other people right now. Just develop your own wisdom. Wait a few years, develop enough wisdom. You don't need to be out there, helping people right away. You need to really focus on your own mind. Now, if you're a parent and you've got a child that you're living with, of course, you're helping them all the time with many different things. But in terms of like actively going out and like helping your sister, your brother, or something like this, no need. They've been doing whatever they've been doing for however many years. Another year or 2 of you developing wisdom and really getting to the point that you can truly help them, it's okay. Just be patient. So work on acquiring your own wisdom first. As I mentioned, a child is their own being. That's why I might say, this is my son Bailan. When I introduce him to people, I know that he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. The mind knows that. But I just say, this is my son Bailan, because it's easier for people to understand. If I said, this is the being that I contributed sperm to 12 years ago or 13 years ago, people would be like, huh? What's that guy talking about, right? Because that's truly all that's happened, right? Is I just contributed this DNA or this, this biological material to create this being. That's really all I did, right? And we are doing that as part of our own pleasure, right? That's really all it was. So he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. He's his own being. And I'm here to help him and support him and help him cultivate wisdom. So be sure you understand and keep in mind that even whether it's your children or whether it's your mom or your dad or your uncles or your brothers or your sisters, they are their own beings. They need to be able to make their own decisions and cultivate their own wisdom. If they can only make wise decisions when you're around, they haven't truly cultivated wisdom. Sometimes as parents might use fear to be able to control their children. But then when you're gone and that fear is removed, they don't make wise decisions any longer because they're only making decisions your way because of the fear. What you would like to do is not use fear, is you would like to help them cultivate wisdom, because then whether you're there or not, they will still make those decisions. So my son knows that it's wise to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to people. And whether I'm there or whether he's off at school by himself, he's polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to people. I get reports from his teachers all the time, particularly when he moves from one school to the other. They're just blown away by how polite and respectful he is. And this was his own wise decisions because he sees how important that is. Because at one time, he was disrespectful to his mom, and sometimes he was disrespectful to me, but he learned different. He saw the gamma. He saw the results of his unwise decisions of being disrespectful. And now he's only respectful to people that he spends time with, right? So these are things that you would like to instill in the children that you're with, is that it's not about fear and you controlling them through fear, because then as soon as the fear is gone, they're not going to do those same things anymore. You would like to help them cultivate wisdom and see that it's wise to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to people, for example, right? It's helpful to start early, whether you're starting early with a child or in a relationship. If you have a life partnership, it's good to start early. If you have a life partnership that you guys have been together for 10, 15 years, it doesn't mean that you can't get involved in, in bringing these teachings into your relationship, but it's best if you start early so you establish the relationship that way. So like a child, their mind isn't very polluted early in life. That's why we're so joyful when we're a child. You look at kids, right? They're like so joyful. They're so gleeful. But it's as we age that our mind takes on more and more pollution. We have more and more conditioning, and we become more and more disgruntled. Sometimes people associate old age with being grumpy and irritable. But you don't have to be old and grumpy and irritable. You can actually be old and cheerful. You can be old and happy. You can be old and glad and cheerful, right? You don't have to be old and grumpy. But sometimes that's the way people think, that just because you're getting old, you're going to be grumpy and irritable. But the only thing that's happened in that situation is a person has developed all this conditioning of mind and pollution of mind. They have all these expectations of the way they want the world to be, and they've lived through all this change. When they were a kid, things were a certain way. But now, 80 years later, all this change has happened, and they don't like it because they have cravings, desires, attachments. They're wanting things to be permanent. And now as an 80 or 90-year-old person, they're really grumpy and irritable. But you don't have to experience that. There's people who are old that are quite cheerful and quite joyful, right? And you can see in a child that they're actually quite joyful and quite gleeful because their mind isn't very polluted. So if you start with your child, training them early, you'll actually be able to see more improvement in that they're actually able to make better improvement. So we started with my son when he was an infant. There's things that you can do, right? Even when my wife was pregnant, she was meditating. She was already meditating when he was even in the womb. And then when he was in the womb, when her and I were around each other, we weren't arguing, we weren't upset, because even though the child is inside the womb, they can hear. They can hear what's going on. Even though there's that skin there, we think that somehow they can't hear. They can hear everything that's going on. So he never heard arguing or yelling or hollering or hostility in our home when he was inside the womb. So it's important to remember that training really starts inside the womb, because if there's anger and hostility and bitterness in mom's mind, or if dad is being harsh and bitter during the pregnancy, the child is absorbing all of that inside the womb. Then once he came out, there were even things that we were doing there that, if you understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and that when the bodily sensations are coming, that's the early warning system that your mind's about to become discontent, and it's wise to cut it off and let it go there. A child doesn't understand that, but you as a parent, you can understand that. So if you see your child getting ready to get upset or frustrated because they wear it on their face, you can see it. Like before they actually start crying, there's like yeah, right. It's like this ugly face kind of, but it's actually kind of cute. You can actually redirect their mind at that point. Right. This is what we used to do. My son would be playing on the ground and his face would kind of start turning. We'd be like, did you see that cloud outside? That is the most beautiful cloud I have ever seen. And he's like, huh. And he would snap out of it. So whatever he was doing that he was playing, maybe his toy broke and he was about to become discontent, we would just redirect his mind to this cloud outside. Or there might have been a bird or a squirrel outside that we would redirect his mind to. And sometimes we would even get his hand and we would take him over to the window to be able to look outside. And this is teaching him to cut it off and cut it off and cut off that discontentedness. So all through his childhood, he was never a crying baby. I never saw him throw a temper tantrum. Never. He never had a temper tantrum because he just never learned how to do that, right? He just, whenever he would become discontent, we would help him cut off his discontentedness by redirecting his mind. So then by the age of 6, I was able to start formally training him. And I started teaching him about impermanence and discontentedness and non-self and the Four Noble Truths and all these other kinds of things. And you guys are going to see some suggestions of how I did that. Essentially what I did is I did it through games. I started playing with him and I started doing games with him to teach him these teachings. But you would like to start early with your training with a child or even with like a life partner early in your relationship. You would like to start talking about the teachings, right? If it's like, 3 years in and you're like, oh, by the way, I'm on the path to enlightenment, life partner. It's like, huh, what's that? Right? But if on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th date, you guys are already talking about true love and anger and frustration and eliminating this, then it becomes part of your relationship and that they know from the very beginning that you're on this path to learning and growing. So start early. Create a culture of acquiring wisdom, the culture of cultivating and acquiring wisdom. This is really helpful that the ultimate goal for all of us to be able to get to enlightenment is to acquire wisdom. And the way you acquire wisdom is through learning, through reflecting to independently verify, and through practicing. That's how you cultivate wisdom on the path to enlightenment. And there's a lot of wisdom to be able to cultivate. You're not believing any of the teachings, but there's also other wisdom besides the path to enlightenment. An enlightened being will be fully wise about the path to enlightenment. They'll know the path to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards, but they're not going to know how to fly an airplane necessarily unless they've trained to do that, right? They're not going to necessarily know how to crochet or knit unless they've learned how to do that, right? So each individual enlightened being, they're going to have certain things that they do that is unique to them, right? Every enlightened being is going to know the path to enlightenment. This is what we call final knowledge, or we call it right wisdom, that the mind is fully cultivated, the path to enlightenment. But there's other wisdom beyond the path to enlightenment. And if you create a culture where your children are understanding that the cultivation of wisdom is helpful in the world, then you can create this within your family unit. So I'll give you examples. Like sometimes I would be driving in the truck, I'd be taking my son to school, and he used to go to the school that it was like 45-minute drive on the way there and on the way back. And on the way in the truck, he would say to me, he would ask me questions about certain things. I can't even remember any of them. And I would say, you know what, son, I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. I said, but I know who does. He's like, who? I said, Google. I said, you got my phone right there. Why don't you Google it? He's like, oh, good idea, Daddy. And he started like Googling and trying to find out like how many people died in World War II. One time he asked me this question. I was like, I don't know. I was like, why don't you Google it? I bet Google knows. And he Googled it. He was like, 75 million, or I don't know what the number is. I think it's 75 million people died in World War II, right? So he learned that. And now he knows that whenever he has a question and he doesn't know the answer to it, he can figure it out and he can cultivate this wisdom. So he understands that the goal in life is to cultivate wisdom, not just about the path to enlightenment, but other topics as well. And this is how kids get involved in reading and going to libraries and, being interested in documentaries. Sometimes I come downstairs, he's watching Netflix and he's got some documentary on. I don't even know what it is. He's like watching some documentary about something because he's interested in cultivating wisdom, right? So this is what you would like to do, is create a culture in your family. your family unit of cultivation of wisdom, not just about the path to enlightenment, but other things about the world too. Even cooking. When my wife is cooking or I'm cooking, we invite my son in to learn how to cook, right? Because he's going to need this. He's going to need to know how to do this. Or if we're ironing clothes, teaching him how to iron clothes, this is really helpful. Okay, so cultivating wisdom as part of the family culture is really helpful. Remember that you're a role model in your child's life, that whatever you do, they're going to follow that. So if you have a really healthy relationship with your parents, meaning your child's grandparents, they're learning how to treat you through the way that you treat your parents, right? So if you have a really nice relationship with your parents and you talk fondly of them, or at least if you don't talk bad about them, then your child's going to learn that through you. Whereas if you're disgruntled and irritated and annoyed and always complaining about your parents to your child is learning that through you. And now they're going to do the same thing about you. This is your karma. This is the results of your decisions. If you teach your child how to complain about their grandparents, they're going to learn to complain about you, and they're going to have this turbulent relationship with you. Or if you go out into the world and you're nice and friendly and polite and respectful to taxi drivers and food servers and people like this, they're learning that through you. You're their role model. They're learning about this world through you. So you would like to understand that you're always teaching your child, not just through your spoken words, but through your actions too. So when you go out into the world and you're treating people with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, they're learning that from you. And it's not just your children. Remember, this is actually a talk about all different kinds of things. It's your life partner too. It's your coworkers. It's your brothers and sisters. When you're out in the world, you need to understand that people are watching you. People are observing you, right? So if you're with your brothers and sisters, or you're with your life partner and you're treating a food server in a degrading and disrespectful way, they're learning that from you, and they see you doing that, and now they're going to treat you the same way. So you would like to uphold a higher level of moral conduct where you're interacting with people in wise ways. And the Buddha teaches you that through the Eightfold Path of how to interact with people in wise ways. And now if you're treating people with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, your life partner sees that, your children see that, your brothers and sisters see that, your mom and dad see that, and now more and more people are going to treat you that way because that's the way that you treat others. So remember that you're a role model, and it's wise to have your own moral conduct and mental discipline because they're learning from that as a role model. Being respectful, as I just mentioned, towards your life partner, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, elders, and people in the community. Your children are watching that all the time. They're learning from you, as well as other people. As I mentioned yesterday, get comfortable with the struggle and allow it to occur. Right? There's some situations where your child's going to have to struggle and you're just going to have to pull back. I gave you that example of my son in the village where he was having trouble with his friends. And I mentioned to you how me and my wife told him like, hey, this is not going to go well. And he was like, no, I want to play with these guys. So we're like, all right, go ahead and play. And then he figured it out. He was like, yeah, this was unwise. And now he knows how to make wise friends and wholesome friends because he learned that through that experience. We tried to teach it to him through our guidance, but he wasn't interested at that point. He had to learn it for himself. So we allowed the struggle for himself. One time he had this attachment and this craving to sitting in the back of the truck because my wife has this truck and I would drive this truck around and he would sit up front with me sometimes. But he had this craving one time because he sat in the back with some adults. And then those adults left. And then whenever him and I would go somewhere, he'd be like, Dad, can I sit in the back of the truck? And he's like 8 years old at this point, 7 years old at this point. And I was like, nah, it's not a good idea. You know, you need some adults back there to sit in the back of the truck. He's like, I really want to sit in the back of the truck. I really want to sit in the back of the truck. And I was like, no, come sit in the front with me. And he kept asking me this over and over and over again for like a week or two. Everywhere we went, he kept wanting to sit in the back of the truck. Well, I kept saying, no. But then eventually I realized, you know what? He's going to have to experience this for himself. He's going to have to extinguish this craving. So one day he said to me, hey, Dad, can I sit in the back of the truck? And I looked up at the sky and I saw the clouds and it was about to rain. And I was like, yeah, you can sit in the back of the truck. And he was like, really? I can sit back there by myself? I was like, yeah, you can sit back there, but just let you know, if it starts raining, you can't come up front. You're going to have to stay back there. And he's like, okay, sure, that's no problem. Because at that point, he didn't know how to tell whether it was raining or not. So he was like, all right, great. I'm going to sit in the back of the truck. I was like, all right, go ahead. So then he's in the back of the truck and I'm driving and we're on kind of some smaller roads. And we get to the stoplight and it starts raining. It starts drizzling. And I hear him knocking on the back of the truck. He's like, knock, 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 knock. And I just ignored it. And I just kept on driving. It was just a little bit of drizzle. It wasn't that hard. So then we kept on going and then the rain got a little bit stronger. And then I knew he was going to need to come up front. So what I did is when I pulled up to the traffic light, I pulled kind of close to the car next to me because I knew he was going to have to get out and come into the truck. And those motorbikes are whizzing back and forth. And I wasn't interested in him getting out in the middle of the traffic with the motorbikes going back and forth. So I pulled a little bit close enough to the truck next to me that the motorbikes couldn't go in and out. So then when it started raining, he decided to get out and come in. And I was like, yeah, come on in. So in this situation, he realized sitting in the back of the truck was unwise. And from that point forward, he's never again asked me to sit in the back of the truck. Right. So he had to cultivate his own wisdom. He had to go through that struggle to be able to see why it's unwise to sit in the back. Right. So these are the kinds of things that you can do. And I did this in a way that I knew he wasn't going to get hurt. Right. I knew he wasn't going to have any kind of life-threatening situations going on. So you might need to do these kinds of things from time to time to allow the struggle to occur. Okay. You can help your children eliminate their attachment to you through various things. Because if your child is attached to you and clinging to you, they're going to be happy and excited when you're around. And when you're not around, they're going to feel miserable and sad. There's different things that you can do, like having them stay at their friend's house overnight or grandma and grandpa's house overnight. They can stay overnight at other places and you can be away. This will help them to learn that they're not going to always be with you. This will help them eliminate their clinging and holding on to you. When you come home to see your children, it's unwise to get really excited, because if you allow their mind to get to that excited condition, then the painful feelings are waiting for them, the sadness, the frustration, and others. So sometimes we do this with animals or we do this with human beings, that when we come home, it's like, mommy's home. Yay, mommy's home. Oh, it's time to get so excited. But then when mommy's gone, everybody's missing mommy. It's like, oh, mommy's not here. We miss mommy. Oh, where's mommy? Right? So if you allow the mind to go to that excited state, then it's going to have that craving and it gets so excited. So then when mommy's gone, everyone's going to be sad and missing mommy, right? That's not the love. We sometimes think that the missing part is the love. That's not the love. That's the craving, the desire, the attachment. My wife just recently went to the USA and she was gone for 2 months. Me and my son didn't miss her. It's enjoyable when she's there. We like it when she's there, but we were completely fine when she was gone. Right? It's not that we don't love her. Of course we love her, right? But we didn't miss her. Right? So you'll need to get used to understanding that the missing someone isn't part of the love. That's part of the craving, desire, attachment. So one of the ways to help your child not get attached, I mean, they're going to be attached when they first are with you, but the way that you help them eliminate it is to not get excited when you're around them, like so excited, like, wow, mommy's home. This is a great time. Let's celebrate. Because then when you're gone, they're going to miss you and they're going to feel lonely, and you've contributed to this, right? So you would like to be sure you're paying attention to that. It's important to have patience, that whatever you teach them, however you guide them, you're going to have to teach them many times. I can't even tell you how many conversations me and my son have had about lying, right? He's 12 years old, well over 100 conversations about lying and why it's so unwise and how he shouldn't be doing this, right? And he's just now getting to the point where I don't think he's lied for a good 6 months, right? But who knows? The next one could be right around the corner, right? So you're going to need to get comfortable with this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Just like you're going to need that too. There's nothing that you've ever learned where you've learned it once and then you're an expert at it the very first time. Whether it's learning to speak English English or read and write English, whether it's some job or occupation that you're doing. It's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So your children are the same way. They're going to need that, and even more so because their mind isn't as developed as an adult. So you're going to need to talk to them countless times about many different topics. So you're going to need to be patient and talk with them, and don't get frustrated just because you talked 2 or 3 times about lying and they're still lying, right? Being angry and frustrated and agitated that you got to have this conversation one more time isn't going to help anything. The agitation and anger and harshness is just going to come back to you in your relationship. So be patient and take your time and have conversations with your children, and understand that you shouldn't have an expectation for them to get it right away. It's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Be creative and have fun. Do creative activities and games with your children. The way that I taught my son about impermanence is I spent about 2 minutes with him in the house talking to him about what impermanence is and constant change. And then I said, hey, let's go outside into the world and have a scavenger hunt. Let's go try to see if we can find something outside that is permanent. So we went around, after I taught him about what impermanence is, that things are constantly changing in the world. We went around the village and started looking for things that were permanent. And of course, he couldn't find anything. So in the first 3 or 4 minutes, when he realized that things around him were not permanent, we switched it. And I said, now let's look for things that are impermanent. So we walked around the village and he's like, oh, look at the leaves. Those brown leaves are brown. The ones up there are green. That's impermanence. They fell down. They can't be in the tree permanently. And I was like, yeah, that's impermanence. Ah, look at the crack on the sidewalk. That's impermanence, Daddy. Yeah, you're right. Ah, look at the fence. That fence has paint and it's really bright and it's really beautiful. But this one, the paint has faded. That's impermanence, right? So we went around the village. We spent probably a good 30 minutes or an hour walking around the village and looking at all these different things that are impermanent. And this is one of his first introductions into understanding the teachings of the Buddha, is the scavenger hunt to teach him about impermanence, right? And then I kind of figured out game after game after game to be able to help him. And sometimes the games I came up with, they didn't work really well, so I had to throw them away or at least, kind of abandon it. But other times I figured out a really interesting and creative game, and he really enjoyed it and he had fun with it, and we were able to help him learn the teaching. So be creative. The children really like this. Don't force your child to learn these teachings. Be welcoming and inviting, but don't force them. Sometimes people talk to me and they think that my son must meditate every single day. The answer is no, he doesn't. He actually meditated for a period of time for like 2 weeks, but now he actually doesn't meditate at all. And I haven't forced him to do it. I haven't tried to control him to do it. It's his choices, right? What I look at is I look at his moral conduct. I look at the way that he speaks to people. I look at his grades and see the way that he interacts with people. And is he really studying and cultivating wisdom? He's going to need to meditate in order to get to enlightenment, but he's developed quite a bit where he really doesn't get discontent at all. I see him maybe 2 or 3 times a year. He'll get a little bit of discontentedness. But other than that, his mind's quite peaceful. So I don't need to force him to meditate, because if I did, he would resent it and he would push it away. So there was a period of time where he did meditate for about 2 weeks. And then he stopped, and it was like, okay, that's his decisions. It's up to him. But at least he's gotten to the point where he's polite and respectful and kind to the people around him. So I don't need to force him to meditate. And even if I tried, it wouldn't work out very well. So it's important not to force your children or your parents or your brothers or your siblings to be able to understand anything about these teachings. It's just not going to work, because people are going to dig their heels into the sand, and it's like you're dragging them across the sand, and they're going to resent that. And it's not going to go very well. It's helpful to start small and then build from there, right? When I first started thinking about the idea of training my son in these teachings when he was 6 years old, I realized that I hadn't really taught him much at that point, because he was still growing and evolving as a human being. By the time he got to 6, I hadn't really taken any effort to really teach him anything very specific. But I knew that in order to teach him, he was going to need to be able to listen to me and be able to understand what it is that I'm sharing and follow me to a certain degree. So we were sitting in the living room, and I realized, like, wow, I need to teach this kid these teachings in order to help him become more peaceful. But I've never taught him anything before, and he's never really followed me with anything before. So he was sitting there on the floor, and I was sitting on the sofa, and he got up and he went into the kitchen. And I said, Bailan, can you get Daddy a glass of water? Because up to that point, I hadn't even asked him something like that before. I said, can you get me a glass of water? And he said, sure, Daddy. And he got me a glass of water and he brought it to me. And I was like, okay, he'll follow me. He'll listen to me. And then he was sitting there, and I waited a few minutes, and I said, can you hand me the TV remote? Because it was right by his feet. And he said, sure, Daddy, here you go. I hadn't even asked him those kinds of things at that point. He was only 6 years old, and he handed me the remote. And I was like, okay, this kid will listen. You know, he'll follow what it is that I'm asking him to do. So this was my starting point. Even though the game was the first thing that I taught him, the way that I started with just asking him to do some minimal task around the house to see if he would actually follow what it is that I'm asking him to do. So you're going to need to start small and then build from there, and ask regularly. So now when he's at home, it's regularly that I might ask him, like, can you go to my room and get my computer charger? If I'm downstairs, I might say, can you go to my room and get my computer charger? And he's like, sure, Dad, go get it and bring it to me. Or I might say, can you get somebody a glass of water? He's like, sure, get up and go get the glass of water, right? So he'll bring me a glass of water. He'll bring our guest a glass of water. Sometimes he does it on his own. And this is how I did it, is through starting small and just seeing if he'll follow what it is that I ask him to do. Get comfortable with mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes and your children are going to make mistakes. It's normal. We're not born perfect. Sometimes when we come from a Christian background, people are taught that Jesus was perfect from birth all the way until he died. This isn't actually true. If you look at the Bible, you can see that Jesus was angry with the people at the temple, and he tossed over tables and he kicked people out of the temple. And because of this, when he got to the point where it was like, hey, do you want me to release this murderer, or do you want me to release Jesus? Who do you want me to crucify? They said, we would like you to let go of the murderer. Crucify Jesus, right? Because Jesus had been around in the public tossing people out of the temples and throwing tables over. Go around Thailand and start tossing people out of the temples and see how quickly you're going to end up in jail, right? People aren't going to take that very kindly, right? So Jesus dying on the cross was a result of his decisions. It wasn't God that did that to him. It was the result of Jesus's decisions. You reap what you sow, the natural law of karma, right? So people are going to make mistakes, and you've made mistakes. Other people have made mistakes. Jesus made mistakes. There's no one that has been perfect from birth, but oftentimes we're taught that Jesus was perfect from birth. So if you grew up in a Christian background, you might think that you or your child needs to be perfect from birth. And this just isn't true. We're all imperfect beings when we're born. And then the path to enlightenment is to become a better and better human being. So you're going to need to get comfortable with this trial and error and learning from your mistakes. When you're creating little games, when you're trying to teach your child things, you're going to make mistakes. And you're going to need to be comfortable with those mistakes. And so are your children. They're going to make mistakes, but just be patient and gradually learn and grow and develop. There's something that I call proactive training versus real-time training. What proactive training is this is like the thing that I did where I taught my son the universal truth of impermanence, where I sat down with him, taught him for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we went out into the village and I started teaching him the teachings of the Buddha through trying to find things that are permanent or impermanent. This is proactive training, where you're proactively training and helping them to learn the teachings. But then there's real life or real time training when they're actually having certain struggles or difficulties. So like my son would come to me sometimes and he would share with me that he's having certain challenge with a relationship at school, and I'd be able to help him in that situation. So you're going to have these two different types of training that you might do, right? So there's proactive training where you might be actively helping them to learn about the universal truth of impermanence, discontentedness, non-self, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and all these other things. The 5 precepts are really good, meditation training, but then there's going to be situations where they come to you or you see that they could use your help. And you're going to need to have loving kindness and compassion and patience to train them in those real life situations, because they're going to be struggling in those situations. And if you're attached to them, you might have emotions yourself, and you're going to have to set those aside to be able to now calmly and patiently teach your child. And if your mind isn't ready to do it, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, then that's not the right time to teach your child. So that story I gave you guys yesterday, where the kids had dumped water on my son and they had hit him with a bucket on his head. If I was experiencing frustration in that situation, that would have been the wrong time to start teaching my son, or going and talking to the neighbors about their son, right? That would have been the wrong time to do that. It's not the proper time. So you would like to gather your mind, make sure you're calm and peaceful before you start teaching or before you start handling any kind of real life situations. Let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions, because there's actually quite a bit here. This is something that we're going to be doing throughout the morning. This is a really comprehensive talk because there's so many things to consider. Do you guys have any questions here on anything I've taught so far? Those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. No questions? Okay, so what I'm going to do is take a break here. It's 10:45. Oh, we have a question? Oh, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, so when you were telling the story about your son and how this process started with him, I just thought something. How did you know that it wasn't your craving of teaching him this? Because he was just 6 years old. So it means that he didn't have the option to choose if he wanted to learn or not. And I think it can happen to me. Like, I don't have kids, but I would love to share this with my family. So, but how can I know that it's not my craving for them to be happy and not just sharing this?
Yeah, so my son did have an option, right? So it wasn't me forcing him to learn these teachings. It was, hey, Bailan, would you like to learn something about the teachings of the Buddha? Yeah, Daddy, what do you like to teach me? I was like, oh, the teachings of the Buddha are going to help you get to peacefulness and joy, where you don't have to experience anger and frustration anymore. Is that something you would like to learn? Yeah, sure, Daddy, what is it? Right? I was like, well, it's going to be a long time for me to teach you. It's going to take many years, but we can get started today. Is this something you would like to learn? We're going to play games. We're going to have fun. He's like, yeah, okay. So it's his decisions, right? So he did have the decision. He could have said, no, I'm not interested. So as a parent, you would like to invite your child and welcome them and invite them to come learn. And then it's their choices to come learn. And that's why even now today, like there's times where he comes home from school and he'll say, Dad, I was leaving school today, and as I was walking down the sidewalk, a cockroach ran under my foot and I smashed it and I killed it. And I'm just curious, am I going to experience any unwholesome karma because of that? Right? So now he's interested. For his whole life, he's been interested in the teachings. So I've never forced him or controlled him. And that's how I know it's not my craving, because I don't get discontent when he is learning the teachings, when he's making mistakes. There's no discontentedness whatsoever. So if you're experiencing this longing, yearning, you'll be able to see the craving in your mind. It's not the fact that you're interested to teach a child about these teachings, but if you have a craving, desire, attachment with your mindfulness, you're going to see the longing and yearning. You're going to see the chasing after it. You're going to be forcing and controlling. You're going to be harsh. You're going to be discontent in these situations. And if you're not experiencing any of that stuff, then there's no craving in the mind. So you'll get better and better with your mindfulness to be able to observe your cravings, and you'll know when something is a craving and when something's not a craving. And one of the big indicators is if you're experiencing discontentedness. So I never experienced any discontentedness around teaching my son the teachings. It's only ever been me being it's been very fun, been very enjoyable, and very pleased to be able to share the teachings with them. So that's how I know it's not a craving. Okay, so let's do this. It's basically 10:50. Let's take a break up until 11:10. That'll give us a 20-minute break. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you guys after the break. Okay, we'll continue on with this topic. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and start.
Okay. We were talking here about Buddhism mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Maybe you can make it part of the class. Would like to sit down and get a mic? Yeah, let's chat.
if they explain
Yeah, because I just turned on the live stream. So yeah, get a mic and we can chat during the class. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And this gentleman was getting ready to ask me a question, and I don't know that it's related to anything that we're talking about, but it's something about Buddhism. So I asked him to just make it part of the class so we can just all talk together, and he was okay with that. So go ahead, sir.
we were talking about mind, and we are both psychotherapists.
Okay.
And for me, mind is more the mental part of our being. But I suspect that the Buddhist mind is much broader. It's like what I call spirit includes spirit and stuff like that. It feels like it's much broader than just our mental part, our mental being. My question is, can you explain what mind really is in the Buddhist vision?
Sure. The mind or the consciousness, it's the thoughts, the ideas, it's the awareness, it's your wisdom. It's an intangible, non-physical thing. So there's the brain, which is the physical organ, and then there's this non-physical mind. And these things are two different things, but they're connected to each other. So this non-physical mind is where you store your thoughts, you have thoughts, you have your ideas, you store your wisdom, your memories, all these kinds of things are all in the mind. And now that mind is either polluted or it's purified. And if it's got pollution, then it's experiencing the unenlightened mental state. And if it's purified, then it's experiencing the enlightened mental state. And as you train your mind, it becomes more and more pure. It has an effect on the brain. The physical structures of the brain will actually change as a result of training the mind, but they're not the same things. So what you were talking about spirit, the Buddha never taught about that kind of thing. He never described anything like that. So it was all about training the mind for the Buddha. And it's not anything mystical or magical or spiritual, even though we talk about it. Some people talk about Buddhism as a spiritual life. The Buddha never taught that there is a spirit here. He left this as an undeclared teaching, but he instead focused on development of the mind through cultivation of the mind and training to cultivate wisdom.
But in Buddhism, is there a recognition of a soul?
The Buddha never taught that there is a soul, but he never taught that there isn't a soul.
Okay.
He has what's called undeclared teachings. When you look at his teachings, he has this discourse where he says, "Remember, monks, what did I teach? I taught this." And he points to the Four Noble Truths because that's the starting point of his teachings. And he says, "Remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this." And he listed out 10 things that he didn't teach. And that was one of the things that he didn't teach, that there is a soul or there isn't a soul, because it conflicts with the universal truth of impermanence, and it conflicts with the universal truth of non-self. So he never taught that there is a soul, but he didn't taught that there isn't a soul either. He just left it as an undeclared teaching.
Okay.
Everything's about training the mind in the teachings of the Buddha. That's why I like the chants that we're doing. It's not invoking the Buddha and asking him to do anything or anything like this.
That I understand.
It's all about training your own mind.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So it sounds like you guys had some great conversations at break. Yeah? Yeah, that's good. Maybe we'll have more and more longer breaks. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to keep going here because there's some more information. This is a really big topic about helping children to learn. And it's so beneficial too, right? Like if we would have grown up with these teachings, not that we can go back and change that at all, but if we could have grown up with these teachings the way Thai children do, we would have a very different life. I know some of you are quite young, but some of us are not as young, right? And we lived with grief and heartache and shame and fear and stress and anxiety and frustration and all these other feelings for so long. And then when you finally discover these teachings and you actually see that you can get to this peace and this joy, it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this existed, right? So like learning these teachings really young, the Buddha taught this, that it's really wise to learn them young. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, consider yourself very fortunate to be learning these teachings, because I would have really enjoyed learning these teachings when I was like my son's age. He was an infant. He was 6 years old. He's going to have a very different life than his dad had, right? So teaching children, it's so rewarding, it's so fulfilling, and it's so great for their life. One of the best gifts that we could ever give to a child is the gift of never having to experience sadness ever again, or never having to experience frustration or guilt or shame or stress. You can't give this to a student, somebody. I can't give my son enlightenment. He has to choose for himself to learn it and develop it. But what we can do is we can choose to teach them. And this is one of the best gifts that we could ever give to them. And for those of us that are a little bit older, we probably look back and like, yeah, it would have been wonderful to have these teachings earlier in life. So consider yourself fortunate if you're young and learning these teachings, because you can have a very different life than some of us. And then if you ever decide to have children, it's wonderful to share this with them so that they can have a very different life. And if you have friends or family around you that are struggling or having difficulties, you're going to have wisdom about the world that they just don't have. They will be struggling and having so many difficulties about so many different things in life. But the more you learn the wisdom of the Buddha, you will have so much more wisdom, and you'll be able to help them in these situations. Things that are very trivial to you and seem almost like insignificant to your family or friends can be like a monumental problem. So by the time that you are cultivating this wisdom on the path, there's things that are just very trivial to you and very simple, but to your friends and family can be very significant, and you'll be able to help them with these little tiny things. So I'm going to keep sharing this with you, because I think one of the most rewarding things is to share the teachings with others. And that's why I spend so much time dedicating my life to sharing with you guys, because of those aha moments that you can have, and you can really lighten up your mind and feel so much better about life and what you're doing in life. That's what it's all about. So if you guys would like to keep learning, I'll just keep teaching here about this topic. So some more things to talk about in relationship to sharing the teachings with others, particularly children, is be prepared for detours. Sometimes as parents, we get into these routines where we kind of do things over and over and over again. Like if you wake up your children, you cook them breakfast, you get them in the car, you take them to school, you pick them up from school, you kind of get in these routines, right? And let's just say you have more than one child, and let's just say along the way, your child is like festering or they're arguing with each other. You need to be prepared for detours. Even though you normally get out the door and you show up to school on time every single day, well, if your children are putting on their snow boots and they're arguing and they're upset and they're festering with each other, you might need to have a timeout and just say, pause, hold on, children, let's talk about this for a moment. Billy, does it really make sense for you to be kicking your sister in this situation? Is that practicing harmlessness? Or are you harming your sister in this situation, right? You're going to need these detours where there's times where me and my son were on way to something, and we were planning to like go play miniature golf. And on the way, my son's ego might have came up, and he might started to get arrogant. He's like, yeah, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Da, da, da. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm interested in playing mini golf with you, if that's the way you're thinking. He's like, yeah, I'm going to beat you, Dad. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's like, no, I'm not going to go play mini golf today. And I would turn the car around and I would like go get something to eat, or we would go somewhere else. So we took a detour, right? Instead of me being attached or craving to go play mini golf, I saw his ego arising, and I was teaching him like, hey, people aren't going to be interested in playing games with you if you're going to play with ego. So now when he plays games, he tends to not play with ego. He just has fun and he just does it for enjoyment, right? Whereas if I would allow that ego to continue and I would have fed it, you're not going to beat me, I'm going to beat you, and yeah, I'm going to school you in this and school you. If I would have fed that ego, he would still continue to have that ego. So on the way to this mini golf, it was a detour that we had to take. We had to not play mini golf because he needed to learn that people aren't going to be interested in playing with you when you have ego. So you're going to need these detours at different times. And if you're not attached to heading to any particular place or doing any particular thing, you'll be willing to take those detours. So if you're clinging or you're craving yourself, then you're going to really want to play mini golf. But the ultimate goal here is to help your children cultivate wisdom. It's not about the mini golf. It's about let's do it in a skillful way and learn how to do this with wisdom. It's not just about going and having a great time and having fun, but it's about making sure they cultivate wisdom in the process of playing this game, right? So be prepared for details or detours. Always be supportive and encouraging. There can be times where you're teaching your children and they're not doing the things that you're suggesting for them to do and you're guiding them to do, and you might feel disgruntled. You might feel irritated if you have craving within your own mind, and you're going to need to be encouraging and supportive and uplifting in these situations. If you do what I refer to as accentuating the positive, whether it's with children or whether it's with employees or whether it's with your neighbors or your friends, if you accentuate the positive, people will tend to step up to that. Whereas if you continually bombard people with negative, degrading things, then they're going to tend to feel bombarded by that, right? So my son, I probably spend a good 99% of my time telling him when he's done things well. Like, wow, you did that really well. Good job, right? Where every once in a while I need to come to him and I need to share like, hey, I noticed you were doing this and this is unwise and I would like to talk about it with you, right? So he's willing to have that conversation because it only happens every once in a while. But by me accentuating the positive more and more, he does those positive things. So there were times where he was having difficulties with his mom in the past, and he would talk in harsh ways to his mom. And I was teaching him the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and I was helping him learn how to speak well with his mom. And when he would do it well, I'd be like, hey, you did a really good job there speaking with your mom. That was really nice. I really saw how you improved because last week you weren't talking to her like that. That's wonderful. You were so gentle and so kind with her. Outstanding. Maybe even a high five or a little rub on the head or something like that, right? So these are the ways that you accentuate the positive, and then they're going to step up and they're going to do those things more and more because they're interested in that. Whereas if 95% of the time you're degrading in them and disparaging them and you're giving them that kind of interaction, they're going to do those negative things more and more because they're going to want your attention. And if they're getting your attention through being negative and degrading and doing unwholesome things, they're going to continue to do those things. So the more you accentuate the positive, the more they will step up to those things. So being supportive and encouraging is really helpful. Eliminating your anger and aggressiveness is going to help you to be able to do any of these kinds of things. Because if you have craving, desire, attachment for your child to be a certain way, you'll be aggressive and hostile. So you're going to need to eliminate your aggressiveness in these situations. It's important to understand the difference between firm speech and harsh speech. The Buddha has teachings where he talks about it's unwise to have harsh speech towards people, because if you're harsh and aggressive and hostile and bitter towards people, this is going to damage your relationships, and this is all just going to come back to you. So you're not interested in being harsh and hostile and bitter. That would be unwise. With anybody, you're not interested in being harsh and bitter. But sometimes with children, you need to firm up your speech a little bit. When I teach people to speak gentle, which is the opposite of harsh speech, I teach people to pay attention to their tone, their tempo, and their word choice, right? Your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. This is what you're going to need to pay attention to in order to speak gentle, right? Well, there's that type of speech of speaking gentle, but then you can kind of modify your tone and your tempo a little bit. But keeping your word choice the same, you can still actually be speaking gentle, but just firm up your speech a little bit without any hostility or anger behind it. So let me give you an example. Let's just say my son's doing a lot of lying, right? I might say to him in kind of like a relaxed way, I might say, Bailan, you need to stop this lying. You're going to have so many unwholesome results because of this. You really should consider stopping this lying, right? This might be something I say to him as we're first starting to talk about lying, right? And then eventually, after he's been lying quite a bit, I might say, Bailan, you need to stop that lying. You're going to experience a lot of unwholesome results with this. You really need to consider stop lying. Right? So this is what I would consider firm speech. my word choice was exactly the same, but my tone and my tempo changed a little bit. And that's how he knows that dad is really serious about this. But that's not the first thing that I go to. I don't just go right to the firm speech. You know, we're joking, we're laughing, we're doing this a few times. I'm sitting down, talking with him, guiding him, teaching him how it's unwise to lie. And then after 3, 4, 5, 6 times of that, perhaps I might need to come in with some firm speech at some point. You know, Bailan, you really need to learn to speak with your mom more kindly and more politely. You know, so a little bit firm, just so they know that you're serious. Just changing your tone and your tempo a little bit. But your word choice, it can still be gentle. I'm not harsh in these situations. And he's the only person that I would do this with. I did this with my wife a few times, but it was most frequently with my son. And the Buddha even teaches this, because the Buddha teaches with his students that he teaches them in the gentle method and he teaches them in the stern method. And the Buddha was kind of like an adopted, he would like adopt his students. Sometimes his students would leave their home, right? All of the time his students would leave the home if they were ordained. But oftentimes they were ordaining with him when they were like 5 years old or 6 years old, or even like 12 years old, or sometimes 20 years old. They would be coming out of their home and they would be living with him almost like a father. So he talks about stern speech and how he firms up his speech when he's talking to people. But he says he tries the gentle method first. And that's what I do with my son. I try the gentle method first. And then if that doesn't work, I will try the firm method and I'll be a little bit firm. And then if that doesn't work, sometimes I need to do the gentle method and then sometimes the firm. And I kind of rotate these back and forth. He relates it to a horse, that he went to this horse trainer, and this horse trainer was like, how do you train your students to learn how to get to enlightenment? And he said, well, let me ask you, how do you train your horses? And he's like, well, first I try the gentle method, and then I do this, that, and the other thing. And he's like, well, what if they don't follow the gentle method? He says, well, then I try the stern method and I be more firm with them. And he's like, okay, well, what if that doesn't work? He says, well, then I try the gentle and the firm method. And he's like, well, what if that doesn't work? He said, then I kill the horse. And he's like, why do you kill the horse? He's like, because it's a bad reputation for my school. And he's like, well, I teach students the same way. You say, I do the gentle method first. And then he says, if that doesn't work, I try the stern method. And if that doesn't work, I do the gentle and the stern method. And he said, if that doesn't work, then I kill them. And this horse trainer is like, what do you mean? You can't kill your students. And he's like, killing a student is to not teach them. And if I don't teach them and I ignore them, then that's like killing them, right? Because a Buddha, they have a limited time. They need to help students. And if a student isn't responding to their advice, then the Buddha says, I kill them, meaning I just don't teach them. I stop teaching them. So of course, I imagine the Buddha probably teaches them for 3 months, 6 months, a year, or what have you. And if this student just isn't responding and isn't making changes, eventually the Buddha's got all these thousands of students continuing to invest in this one student who isn't trying to make progress. He eventually gets to the point where he just says, you know what, I'm not going to teach this person anymore. And this is helping the student with loving kindness and compassion to see, if you don't put in effort, if you don't put in dedication and diligence, then the teacher isn't going to teach you. So the Buddha used to kill his students sometimes. He would just not teach them, right? Just like the horse trainer, right? So you can, with a child, you're going to always be teaching them, right? You're not going to stop teaching your child, but you need to sometimes have this gentle method. You sometimes need this stern method, but this stern method is just firming up your words a little bit, where you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile. There's no anger behind it. You're just changing your tone, your tempo a little bit, and your word choices are the same. Okay, still very loving speech, but just firmed up a little bit. Okay, so it's in, as I've shared, what you're doing as a parent or as an employer or as a friend or anything like this, you're imparting wisdom. It's up to that person to cultivate wisdom, but you're providing the opportunity for them to learn the wisdom. So don't look at it as you're trying to force them or control them to do things your way, but instead you're sharing wisdom that's going to allow them to make choices that are going to be wise. And you would like the wisdom to be based on the natural laws that the Buddha is teaching. You're not just sharing your opinions and your views and your beliefs and trying to get your children to do those things. Instead, you're helping them to learn these skills of things like right speech and right action and things like this. So you're going to need to impart wisdom and wise decision making and see it that way rather than trying to put your expectations on them. It's really helpful to have mini lessons in repeated tasks. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in the car with my son and we've been driving somewhere and there's a little 30-second lesson here or there that I've given him and it's helped him in that situation. We've been driving down the road before and he saw like a dead animal on the side of the road. And he's like, "Dad, there's a dead dog back there." And I'm like, "Really? Well, what is that all about?" And he's like, "That's impermanence, Dad." I'm like, "Yep, exactly. That's impermanence," right? And that's it. Just a little lesson like that. Or we're just driving down the road and someone's honking the horn and they're being angry at somebody. And I'll ask my son, I'll say, "Son, is that wise to be angry at people and be aggressive and hostile like that?" He's like, "Nope, that's not wise, Dad." I was like, "What's going to happen if you're aggressive and angry with people?" He says, "It's just going to come back to you." I was like, "Okay, great," right? So these little 30-second things, these little mini lessons like this is what you would like to be able to do because children learn in little short spurts like that. You guys can sit here for 3 hours with a break in the middle and you can learn, right? In the morning like this. But for a child, they can't do that. So they need these little mini lessons. And then repeating tasks, right? Where they get the opportunity to take the wisdom that you taught them and then actually get to implement it right away. I'll tell this story to you of something that I helped my son with so that you can understand how this is helpful. So I knew at one time that my son was attached to Sprite, the soda Sprite, and I knew that he was really craving it, and I could tell that he wasn't interested in sharing it, and he didn't like to share, and that's how I knew that he was attached to it. So he used to go to this school that it was about 45 minutes away from our house. So when we would come with dinner in the car so that he could eat on the way home because he was really hungry after school. So I got a Sprite and I got some other foods and stuff, and it was in the car. And when he came to the car, this food and the Sprite was in there waiting for him, and we were going to drive home. And on our way home, he cracked open his Sprite, and I said, "Can I have a sip?" And at first, he didn't really want to give me the soda. You could tell he really didn't want to share it. But eventually, he handed it to me. And I took it, and I put it up to my lips, and I wasn't even interested in drinking it because I don't really drink sodas. And I put it up to my lips, and right away as I put it up to my lips, he's like, "Gosh, what are you doing? You're drinking so much. Why are you drinking so much?" He was starting to get angry and frustrated. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I could tell he's attached to it, right? I hadn't even started drinking it yet. I was like, "In that case, maybe I'll just give it to your mom then." And I put it in the cup holder where I was at in the car. And then he got more angry, right? Because he really wanted this Sprite. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to take it home and give it to your mom. She likes Sprite. She'll drink the Sprite." And he got so angry. His face started turning red. This is the only time he ever yelled at me. And he actually cussed at me too. He called me some profanity. And we were on our way to soccer practice or football practice. And I said, "Your mind isn't ready to play football. We should just go home." So we ended up going home, right? So we went home. All through the car ride, he was a little bit upset and angry, but he was calming down little by little. And then ultimately, by the time we got home, I said, "Bailan, we need to talk. I would like to talk with you about this." So he came over, he sat down on the floor. This is the way he knows when we're having a serious talk. He will sit on the floor and I'll sit on the sofa. And he sat on the floor and we talked about this, and he developed the wisdom to understand hey, if he needed more Sprite, we could just stop at the store and get another Sprite. It's not a big deal. How many Sprites has Dad bought you in your life? And if you need another one, we can just buy another one. He can share. And he learned this in that particular conversation that evening when we were at home. Okay, so he learned about sharing and generosity and how this is going to help him to eliminate his craving. Well, the very next day, I went to go pick him up at school, and I got him another Sprite. And I put it in his side of the car, and he opened the door and he saw the Sprite and he looked at me, and he saw the Sprite and he looked at me and he saw the Sprite. So I was giving him an opportunity to take the wisdom from the evening before and implement it right away. So he got in the car and he cracked open his Sprite And I said, Bailan, can I have a sip? And he said, sure, Dad, here you go. And then he handed it to me right away. It was really quick. Instead of the day before, it was really slow, right? And I said, how much can I drink? How much will you allow me to drink? And he said, Dad, you can drink as much as you like. And I said, oh, okay, thank you, son. And then I think I took a little sip and I just like handed it back to him, right? And then from that point forward, there was like maybe 2 weeks later, we were at a restaurant and he ordered a Sprite and he had it at the table. And I said, Bailan, can I have a sip? And he gave it to me and I drank like half of it. I was like, I drank a whole bunch of it, taking it all the way down. And he looked at it and he was like, Dad, you drank almost my entire Sprite. And I said, yeah, I did. I said, what would you like to do about this? He said, can I order another one? I said, sure, go ahead. Right? So he learned that this Sprite is impermanent and I don't have to cling to it. And if I would like some more, I'll just get some more. Right? So sometimes when I tell this story, parents are like, or students are like, wow, you're so rude. How could you do that to your son? You like drank all of his Sprite. No, what I was doing is I was helping him eliminate his craving. That's what I was helping him to do. It wasn't about whether he drank Sprite on that day or not. It was about getting rid of this craving. Because just imagine if this was like 20 years from now and he was sitting at the table with maybe his in-laws, maybe he's has a life partner, and his father-in-law was like, hey, can I have some of your Sprite? And he's like, no, you can't have my Sprite, right? And now he's like angry and bitter and hostile to his father-in-law. So I'd rather he do that with me and I can help him, I can train him, I can help him work through that than doing it later when he's in another situation. Maybe he does it with his boss, right? And he has all kinds of problems or something like this. So I see these situations with my son, and I actually do things where I will give him these little mini lessons and I'll teach him something, but then I will have him repeat it and making sure that he takes the lesson that I taught him and implements it right away. And that way he gets the wisdom and he's able to have that wisdom. Whereas if I teach it to him and he doesn't run across that situation for 3 more months, he's not going to remember the things that I taught him. So if you teach your child something in any kind of lesson, it's good to create a situation where they can repeat it right away and implement the wisdom that you actually taught them in that particular situation, right? So there's times where he was bitter and harsh and hostile to his mom, and I would be there and I would say, hold on, time out. Bailan, you were just too harsh with your mom. I was like, what are the 5 factors of well-spoken speech? And he'll say, oh, to speak at the right time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness. Okay, which ones were you not just practicing with your mom? And he was like, well, speaking at the proper time, it was true. He's like, it wasn't so gentle. It wasn't beneficial and wasn't with a mind of loving kindness. I was like, yeah, you're right. So how about you now say the exact same thing that you just said or something similar, but you make it a little bit more gentle, more beneficial, and more with loving kindness. And right away, he was able to implement it and then start practicing it. And then sometimes we kind of play. His mom's like, okay, like she's kind of like waiting for this gentle and loving speech. She kind of plays into it and we play like a little game with it. And then he lifts up his wisdom and he gets more and more wise to be able to practice because he gets an opportunity right in the moment. Instead of us being angry that he was speaking in a non-gentle way, we kind of make fun with it. And then he gets an opportunity to practice it again, implementing the wisdom right away. So this is something you can do with your friends, your family. You can do it with your coworkers. You can do it with your employees if you have employees, and you can do it with children as well. If you teach something, you can create a little situation where they have an opportunity to do it again. Use the Eightfold Path as your guide for your child, that's what you would like to learn yourself, because that's what's going to help you on the path to enlightenment. But then that's also what's going to be your guide in your journey to helping your child as well. So the Eightfold Path is really what you need to be able to teach your child. Everything that I've taught my son has been some aspect of the Eightfold Path. And this is what's going to help you to get to enlightenment, and it's what's going to help them too, because that's where the natural laws are being learned partially. Teach life skills is very important, because your child is going to need to learn how to cook and clean and wash dishes and vacuum and sweep and all these kinds of things. At one time, I used to have quite a bit of money. So we used to have maids and people who were taking care of our house and laundry and food and all that kind of stuff. And my son kind of got used to that early in life. But then as things changed and I don't have those things anymore because I don't have that kind of money, he had to learn to cook and clean and wash his clothes and sweep and all these kinds of things, because having ability to hire people to take care of you like that, it's impermanent. It's not permanent. So he needed to learn how to do these things. So if you teach children life skills, this will really help them. So that's something that you can focus on. As we've talked already, it's important to not punish. It's important to have guidance and speak and talk with your children. But there are situations where you might need to get their attention. So like my son, if I'm teaching him, I might teach him something for 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And if he's just not getting it, then maybe on like the 5th or 6th time, I might say, okay, son, you're really lying here quite a bit. And it seems like you're not learning and you're not understanding. If you lie again, we're going to have to do something to get your attention and make sure that you understand how serious this is. And he's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And I'll say, I think you need to give up your computer, or I think you need to give up your PlayStation, or I think you need to give up the TV. I think this is going to be time for you to think about what it is that you're doing. And he's like, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, I think you're right. Okay. So he'll agree. And I'll say, okay, if you lie again, how many days do you think you should be without your computer? And he says, I think I should do it for 3 days, be without my computer. I'm like, okay, so you and I are agreeing that if you lie again, you're going to need to be without your computer for 3 days. And he understands it's not a punishment. It's an opportunity for him to use that time to think about his lying. Right? And he's the one who came up with it. So that way, when he lies, he already knows what's going to happen. It was his decision, right? So in this situation, you might need things to like get their attention. So you're not punishing them, but you're talking through with them and showing them their consequences and giving them space to learn and grow, that you're not punishing, but instead you're giving them this opportunity to think about what it is that they did. And at the same time, you might be helping them with a craving, right? Because my son was attached to video games and these kinds of things. So during that time where he didn't have his computer, not only is he learning not to lie, but he's learning to eliminate his craving to the video games too. So those are the things that you can do. It's helpful to reward good conduct when you see your children or your employees or people around you that are doing things wisely. It's helpful to reward that. So there's times where I've rewarded my son for different things, where I see him doing things that are really wise and helpful. I'll reward that. There's times where my son has asked me, like we've been in 7-Eleven, and he'll say, Dad, can I get a bag of Doritos? And I'll say, let me think for a minute. Were you speaking polite to your mom yesterday? Were you kind and friendly with her? Right? So maybe I'm trying to help him with right speech, and I'll kind of sit there and pretend that I'm going through my mind and figuring that out. And I'm like, yeah, actually you were quite polite with your mom yesterday. So yeah, you can get those Doritos, right? I would have got him the Doritos anyway, right? Because the kid needs to eat. But if I can connect it to some wise decisions that he's making, he sees like, wow, I'm getting the Doritos because I was polite and respectful to mom. And then he learns to be more and more polite and respectful to mom. So every once in a while, I'll connect these things that he's getting, like candy or ice cream or things like this, to something wise that he's been doing, right? So this is a way to help them to realize their good conduct is going to produce wholesome results. It's helpful to not assume you know the full story. With children, you're not going to get the full story. When they come home from school or there's some situation that's going on, you're never going to get the full story. So there's times where my son has come home and said something's happened at school. And then when I talk to the teacher or I talk to the other kid involved, I get more of the story. So sometimes when your kid comes home with a story, you might feel like you need to rush in there to the school and start making a bunch of decisions, but you're making decisions without full information. You need to take your time and be sure you're asking questions to everybody, including your children, and make sure you're fully informed before you start making decisions. This will be really helpful for you. The location and position of when you're teaching your children is very important. Here in Thailand, the adults and the people who are older will tend to sit on the sofa, where the children will tend to sit on the floor. And this isn't to say that children are below us, but this positioning is really important. When my son's sitting on the sofa right next to me and we're chit-chatting, we're just having casual conversation. But when he's sitting on the floor, he's looking at me and he's taking in information in a very different way than when we're sitting on the sofa next to each other. So he's come to understand that when there's something really serious, he comes and sits on the floor, and then he learns much better this way. So you're going to see that this is really helpful for you. And this didn't happen from the very beginning. I had to teach my son this. Like, there were times where I would say, hey, son, we need to talk about something important. And he would come over and sit next to me on the sofa. And I would say, I need you to sit on the floor for this one, because I would really like to make sure you learned this. And after we did this 3, 4, 5, 6 times, now he knows by himself when there's a really important conversation, he'll know that conversation is important, and he'll come and sit on the floor by himself. He just knows that that's really helpful for him, because he sees that it helps his mind to be able to learn. So the location and position that you sit and your children sit is really important when you're teaching and you're helping them to learn very impactful lessons. They'll pay attention more in these kinds of situations. It's important to remember that you can be friendly to your children, but you're not their friend. Sometimes in some cultures, we think our job is to be our child's best friend, and their friends are going to have a very different relationship with them than you are. And if you try to cast your relationship as a parent as being their friend, that means they're going to look at you in a very different way than if you maintain the position as a parent. If you can maintain your position as a parent, this puts you in a much different category than this friend. They're going to have friends. They're going to need friends. And you can be friendly to your child, but it's important that you don't see it as you are their friend, because their friend's going to do things like try to maybe encourage them to use drugs or alcohol or different things like this. You're not going to be doing those things. So if you put yourself in the category as a friend, they're going to look at you in a very different way than what you might be interested in them looking at you as. You would like to maintain this position as a parent, and your role is to impart wisdom and guide them and help them through life. A friend is doing something very different than that. Sometimes friends do those kinds of things, but not in the same way as a parent. So it's helpful to maintain your position as a parent in this person's life. Ensure your child understands true love. Sometimes our children don't understand true love. One time my son told me that his mom doesn't love him. He was kind of young when he said this, and he said it when we were going out somewhere. He said, "Mom doesn't love me." And I said, "Oh, really? Mom doesn't love you? Why do you think that?" And he's like, "I don't know. Mom just doesn't love me." And then I started talking to him. I said, "Well, what is love? How would you know if your mom loves you? What are the type of things that people do that you would know that someone loves you?" Right? So you're going to need to teach them what true love is. So the more you understand what unconditional love is and loving somebody as they are, the more you can impart this wisdom with your children, because they might not understand love. They're not going to understand it from the very beginning. You're going to need to teach them what true love is. Just like you need to learn true love and practice true love, they're going to need to know the same things. So you're going to need to teach them what true love is and then practice it, right, through your actions. You're going to need to communicate love through your communication, but your actions speak much louder than your words. So it's helpful to share with your children that you love them through your communication. When I was in my 30s, I actually went to my mom and I asked her if she loved me, because I wasn't sure. I had never heard that growing up. I didn't hear from mom ever that she loved me. I grew up not hearing that at all from my mom. So in my 30s, I went to my mom and I asked her if she loved me. And of course, she said she did, but I couldn't tell because of her actions and the way that I was interacting with her all through my life. So if you communicate love through your spoken words, but also through your actions, then your child will have no doubt that you actually love them. And because I grew up that way without my mom telling me that she loved me, I was interested in ensuring that my son didn't grow up in that same way. So I tell him that I love him every once in a while, and he tells me the same thing. And then he can see it through my actions. And sometime I asked him, I said, "Does Dad love you?" And he says, "Yes, you do." And I said, "How do you know?" And then he will explain to me ways that he knows that I love him. So this way I know that he knows that I love him, and he knows what true love is, because I'm doing that through my actions, but also through my words too. So you would like to communicate love through your words. You would like to make sure that they know what love is, and you would like to make sure you're practicing love through your actions. And this way your children won't be confused of whether or not you love them or not. Sometimes we assume that our children know that we love them just because we know that we love them and we're doing things because we love them, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily know, right? So my son coming to me and telling me that his mom doesn't love him, I was like, huh? Right? Because I know that she loves him because I see it, but he couldn't see it. He didn't understand. So you're going to need to teach your children what love is and then function that way through your actions and your speech to ensure that they know what love is. If you have multiple children, it's important that you love all your children equally instead of treating them differently. We talked about this with the Brahma Viharas, with equanimity, treating all beings equally. That includes your children too. If you have one child that you give many gifts to them, but the other child, they don't really get very much, this is going to create an off balance in your relationship with your children. You like to treat them all equally. It's helpful to remember that it's important to spend quality time versus quantity of time, because sometimes we feel like just spending lots and lots and lots and lots of time with our children, but instead it's more about quality and making sure that you're doing quality things with your children. That's going to promote better relationships with them. If you're in a situation where you have shared custody, sometimes parents have this where, maybe they're sharing a child back and forth. Understand that if you're teaching your child about these natural laws and about the path to enlightenment, things like right speech and right action, they might be performing really well. They might be doing things really well with you at home. You might be seeing their behavior improving, their interactions improving and stuff like this. But then when they go to the other person's house, that person might not be teaching them the same things as you. So when they come back, they're not going to be as practicing the teachings as much as they were when they left home. I've had some parents and some students that get very impatient with this, that I have some students that are learning with me for several years. They're teaching their children these teachings. Their children are doing really well because maybe they're with mom for an entire month, but then they go to summer vacation with dad, and maybe now they're gone for 2 weeks. And then when they come back, their child's practice is less than what it was when they left, right? So you're going to need to be patient and understand that if you have shared custody, when they go away from you for a few weeks, when they come back, they're not going to be practicing the same way. So you're going to need to take a couple of days to kind of get refocused and restabilized and understand that that's part of the nature of having shared custody, that your ex-partner isn't actually maybe teaching them the same things, and the child's not learning the same things, and they're not practicing the same things when they're in somebody else's home. So when they come home to you, they're going to be in a different situation than when they left. They can be influenced by others, not only by ex-partners, but when they go to school, you're going to see your children are influenced by others. Like maybe you're teaching your child to not have ego, but when they go to school, they're around a bunch of kids that have ego. So when they come home, they're going to have a certain amount of ego. Or maybe you're teaching your child how to speak gently. And now when they go to school, maybe they're around teachers or other people who are speaking harsh and bitter. And when they come home, they're going to be speaking harsh and bitter. Rather than being irritated or annoyed or anything like that, just understand that their mind is being influenced by other people, and you just need to show them the wisdom that, hey, while you might have went to school and your teachers are talking a bit harsh or your friends are speaking a bit harsh, this isn't the way that we practice. Here at home and in other places, I would like you to be focused on practicing gentle speech. Right? So you can share this kind of wisdom with them and help them to be able to see that speaking harsh and aggressive isn't helpful and it's not going to produce beneficial results in their life. So be aware that they're going to be influenced by others, and you're going to need to teach them and guide them and help them see that that's unwise, right? I already talked about excitement, that it's unwise to allow your child to get excited, right? If you're coming home and incentivizing the excitement, this is just going to get their mind to the point where they get so excited when you're around, but then when you're gone, they're going to be feeling sad or lonely or bored or something like this. So you can enjoy things. You're going to need to learn how to enjoy things without this conditional excitement. In the unenlightened state, we know craving, desire, attachment, and that's what motivates us. I mean, we're chasing after that excitement. We're chasing after those pleasant feelings. But you're going to need to learn how to enjoy something without conditional pleasant feelings. Right now, you might not know how to do that, but more and more you'll be able to do that, and then you'll be able to teach your children how to do that, that they can enjoy something and then be done with it and move off to the next thing. Whereas if you get so excited about this particular thing, You can only be happy and excited when that thing is going on. And now when you're not doing that thing, you feel sad or miserable or lonely or bored. So you would like to teach them how to enjoy something and then let it go and now move to this other thing that they're doing. So you're going to need to learn this for yourself and then teach it to your children. This praise and reward system, this is really helpful, that you incentivize improved behavior through praising your children and rewarding them. And as I mentioned, sometimes that can be candies or snacks or things like this, but also see it as your hugs are rewards, or a little rub on the head, or a little high five, or things like this. It doesn't have to always be something that you buy, right? So there's times where it could just be your words. It could be like, hey, that's a really good job, son. Really excellent. That's wonderful. I like to see that you're doing that. That's outstanding. Good job, right? So those are helpful things as well. Okay, so that's the last thing here. Any questions you guys have on anything that we're talking about? I know this was a lot of information, and some of you guys don't even have kids, so please go ahead, ask questions.
Yeah, I don't really have kids right now, but I see a lot of these actually apply to our guidance for ourselves even. So one question I want to ask is, when you talk about the truck example, like you let your son go into the back of the truck, what is the boundary of, when we have a craving, what is the boundary of fulfilling that craving versus just let it go?
Yeah, so something we haven't talked about in this class very much, I don't think, or maybe at all, is there's two ways to eliminate a craving. There's cutting it off and letting it go, and then there's fulfilling it. And then if you fulfill a craving, your mind will let it go. So, for example, if I've always wanted to go to the Philippines and I have this burning desire to go to the Philippines, I just want to go so badly, I could cut that off and let it go, and I could train my mind like, hey, you don't have money, you can't go to the Philippines, it's not possible to travel, just be content in Thailand. You could do that. That's one way to let go of a craving, desire, attachment. Or you could just go to the Philippines. Just go, explore, look around, been there, done that. Okay, the craving's gone, right? So in certain situations, that might be the way you decide to eliminate certain cravings. And these are all things that aren't harmful, right? So like going to the Philippines isn't harming anybody. If somebody was like, I have a craving to snort cocaine, I wouldn't say like, oh, you should fulfill that. Go ahead and go do that. That would be unwise, right? So you would like to look at the things that you're doing and decide for yourself, like, what would be the best way to extinguish this. And with my son, what I was trying with that truck example is I was trying to help him cut it off and let it go. So for like 3, 4, 5 times, I was like, no, you can't ride in the truck. It's not wise. It's not helpful. You don't have adults back there. You're too young. You know, I was trying to teach him these kinds of things. But he just wasn't cutting it off. He just kept wanting to do it. And I was like, okay, well, let me help him extinguish this by fulfilling it. And that's what I did with him, because I could see he wasn't able to cut it off and let it go. So in some situations, you're going to need to fulfill it for yourself. So you need to look at those things. If you're fulfilling a craving, though, you have to be careful that it's not going to then produce more craving and more craving and more craving. So this example of the Philippines, if I really have this burning desire to go to the Philippines, and now I go to the Philippines and it's like, oh, wow, this was excellent. Now I want to go to Hong Kong. Now I want to go to Beijing. Now I want to go to this place or that place. Now the mind's just stacking craving on top of craving. So you have to be able to look at this. An enlightened being will travel, right? There's no harm in traveling, but you need to just be sure there's not a craving for it. And the way that you'll know that there's a craving for it is there's going to be this burning desire, and you're going to get this excitement when you get to go to travel. And when you're not traveling, you'll kind of feel bored and mundane. Or like if you get really excited to travel and you show up to the airport and your flight is delayed, you'll be frustrated and agitated and annoyed. So if you're seeing that discontentedness, that's the red light on your dashboard that you see is like, I got a craving to travel. Or, I got a craving to go to the Philippines. I'm going to need to eliminate this. So once you eliminate your craving to do it, then you can actually do that thing, but you're doing it without craving. I'll give you a more simple example. Let's just say somebody's attached or craving a piece of chocolate cake, and they go to this restaurant and they have the best chocolate cake you've ever had. Oh my goodness, it's so wonderful. It's such great chocolate cake. And now when you leave, you're like, I can't wait to go back to that restaurant to have that chocolate cake. That is the absolute best chocolate cake. So now next week, You're getting ready to go to that restaurant. It's like, oh, I can't wait to go to that restaurant. We're going there today for lunch. It's going to be so fun. Let's go get that chocolate cake. You show up to the restaurant. You say, hey, here's my order. I would like this. And then I'd like a piece of chocolate cake. And then the person says, oh, sorry, we're out of chocolate cake today. Right? And if you get frustrated and agitated and annoyed, you know you're attached to this chocolate cake, and you can see it through the example that I'm giving. Well, if you know that you're attached to this chocolate cake, now what you would like to do is you would like to distance yourself from it, because you're holding on to it, you're clinging, and you want this chocolate cake really bad. So if you're holding on to something and you want these pleasant feelings, the way to eliminate your attachment is to distance yourself from it. You need to distance yourself, train your mind to let go of this chocolate cake and eliminate that. And now, say 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, you haven't had this chocolate cake at all. Now you can start having the chocolate cake again, because there's no harm in doing that. But now you're doing it without craving, so that you show up to the restaurant and you say, hey, I'd like to have my chocolate cake, please. And they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have chocolate cake today. Oh, no worries. Do you have apple pie, or do you have fruit? Or, you know what? I don't need a dessert today. I'm completely fine. Thanks for letting me know you don't have chocolate cake. And you can maintain your contentedness. Then you'll know that you've eliminated your attachment to chocolate cake. So it's the same thing with traveling. The problem isn't the travel. The problem is the longing and yearning for it. So in some situations, you're going to need to distance yourself from something that you're attached to and that you're holding on to. And that's how you're going to eliminate your craving. And those are the things that you're attracted to. You're going to need to distance yourself from it, or you're going to need to fulfill it, and you're going to need to just do it. But you like to make sure you don't stack more craving on top of that. In other situations, you're going to have a craving and you're going to be repulsed by this thing, and you're going to be pushing this thing away, right? In those situations where you're having craving that you're repulsed by something and you're pushing it away, you're going to actually have to put your mind in that situation to train your mind to let it go. So I'll give you an example on this. Let's just say that you are repulsed by large groups. And when you're around a large group, you feel uncomfortable and you don't like being in large groups, and you're trying to push this away. And you're like, I'm never going to be around large groups. I don't like being around more than 5 people. Anything more than that, I feel uncomfortable. Well, in this situation, if you just keep trying to push that away, you're not going to be able to eliminate your craving. Next thing you know, you're walking down the street in New York, you turn the corner, and boom, there's a large group. You're in the middle of 500 people, right? And you just had no idea this was going to happen. Now you're uncomfortable because of your craving. So the wise thing to do would be, because you know you're repulsed by this and you're pushing this away, is instead put your mind in that situation. Start going around some large groups and train your mind to be comfortable in that situation. And that's what will eliminate your craving to be in small groups. So things that you're attracted to and that you want, you're going to need to distance yourself from it. That's going to help you to cut it off and let it go. Or you're going to need to fulfill it. But just be sure you don't stack craving on top of it. The things that you're repulsed by and you're pushing away, you're going to need to put your mind in that situation repetitively, multiple times, until your mind gains its comfort and its joy and its peace. That you're just as peaceful and joyful with 5 people as you are in 500 people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions? Okay, let me see if we have anything online here. John, I saw you grab a mic. Do you still have a question? No? Okay. All right. Okay. So it's 10 minutes after 12. We can take a full hour and a half break today for lunch, and then that brings us back at 1:40. So I'm going to start class at 1:40, and when we come back, I'm going to be teaching you guys this next topic, which is developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends and a life partner. Because depending on who you choose to be in your life, you're going to be affected by this. So it's important to choose wisely your friends and your life partner, but doing so without judgment and judging other people. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys at 1:40. Thank you for the discussion. We'll see you after lunch perhaps. Take care.